It was only back in high school when I started thinking that maybe I could be a gifted kid. Gifted, what does that mean? Well, gifted suggests that as a kid, you learn faster than others, you perform and progress more easily, things come more easily to you than other students your own age, and that you can think and reason about the world more effectively. It's said that gifted people have higher intelligence, but whenever I took an intelligence test, I always got a pretty average result. So why did I think I was gifted? Well, there were several reasons. First of all, what I found was that I learned to read very quickly and I got started reading at a very early age. I read a lot, and because I read a lot, I developed my language very quickly. Compared to other kids, I spoke like an adult. I spoke in a mature way. People called me a parent, an extension to the teacher. I got to start school a year earlier, and even though I had a year below the other kids, I did as well, if not better than the other kids. I wasn't necessarily the best in school. The truth was, I was sloppy, I made a lot of mistakes on the way, and perhaps I was a bit overconfident, and this made a lot of people argue that maybe I wasn't gifted. Now, for example, I'd hand in my math book before anyone else, and I'd ask for the next one because I was so eager to progress to the next level. But my teacher would look at this and say, yeah, I think you made a couple of errors here. And she'd ask me to retake the entire book because she felt I was being sloppy and lazy. So I did this, but of course at the same time I felt annoyed because why is she asking me to do this? Why is she telling me I'm doing it wrong? Why is she not letting me progress to the next level? So this became a pattern for me in school, and in school I would constantly try to exceed or impress teachers by what I did. For example, I started out writing really long novels, but honestly, if I look at those novels today, I'd probably say, yeah, that's pretty scrappy quality, honestly. I'd write about Vikings, I'd write about medieval knights, I'd write about Harry Potter fan fiction. I was obsessed with Harry Potter after all. Now, no other kid would write at that level or would write that much, and no other kid was that interested in it. No other kid would read as much as I did in school, in my class at least, where I grew up. And in my school and where I grew up, I lived in northern Sweden, and there was not a lot of resources available in regards to giftedness or progression or how people should engage and process these things, right? So most schools would let kids just progress at their own age, following, if you're old enough, you progress to the next level. After that year, you go to the next one, and so on. There is no way to go or progress faster. And to me, I was honestly often quite bored and understimulated. I wanted more, and I wanted faster, and I wanted to be more challenged. Some teachers were sympathetic to what I did. For example, my English teacher told me I didn't have to show up to class anymore. She said, I'll give you an A. I know you're good at English. I know you don't really need to be here. So I'll just give you an A and we'll call it that. Same with my psychology teacher. And ultimately, I went through my last years having almost no classes. I'd already done exams on most of them. But some teachers were more skeptical and felt that I shouldn't be able to do this and argued against this. Now, ultimately, that meant that I had 3 classes in the last year that I think in my last year I was at school for about 2 hours a week instead of 40 compared to the other kids. Now, in general, my parents would always argue that I shouldn't be allowed to skip a grade. Their argument was that they wanted me to learn to connect to kids my own age. They were worried that I would often go and talk to adults more than other kids. They felt that I was getting a bit isolated and a bit lonely growing up, and they wanted me to learn and make more of an effort to connect more with other people. And now, the truth was, I didn't actually dislike any of the people in my school. I quite liked most of the other kids. I had best friends and close friends that I grew up with that I really connected with. The only reason I got a bit isolated was because I had a rough period when I was a kid, when my sister was struggling a lot, and through that, divorce and other things, I had a few years when I was a bit more to myself. But on the whole, I was a very social kid, and I was super enthusiastic, had a lot of energy for others, and I loved to talk to others, and that included people in my own class. It was more often that they didn't want to talk to me, that they found me annoying because I talked so much and so quickly. I had to go to a speech therapist because I'd speak so fast that my words would be hard to interpret by other people. Now, I went there once, and after they told me, I basically said, okay, I will talk more slowly, and so I did. I adjusted how I behaved to fit in more with other people. When I hit teenager years, I of course was a little bit more worried that I didn't fit in, and I cared a little bit more about how I was perceived, and I felt a bit more isolated or estranged from other people. And of course, I wanted to connect with other people. Luckily, thanks to the internet, I was able to meet a lot of people that were a lot like me, that shared my enthusiasm for physics, for mathematics, for biology, and for social sciences and politics. I got politically active when I was 12, and it was because I had a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm to make a difference. I was interested in society. I wanted to be able to vote like other people could in the elections. I wanted to be involved. But other people in the groups and organizations felt I was a bit too young, so they told me, you're allowed to come back when you're 15. So 15, I got involved for real in politics, and up to that point, what I did instead was I wrote a blog, I created my own website, I learned web design, and I started to share my thoughts online. I became one of the biggest bloggers on politics when I was 17, and I couldn't believe it. People were sharing my articles all over the place. The only problem was I was quite inconsistent. I never really had a lot of consistency to back up my drive. Sure, I got interested in physics. Sure, I learned about Albert Einstein's theory. Sure, I was good at German languages, and I was good at English, and sure, I could write a lot. But yeah, all in all, I've always been held back by the fact that I do make a lot of mistakes and that I'm a bit too much in a rush. By constantly being in a rush and constantly feeling like you have to exceed expectations and do things faster and faster, I did burn out eventually. I pushed myself too hard, I didn't understand my boundaries, and I never really learned the patience my parents wanted me to learn. Yeah, they always thought that by letting me progress more slowly and by keeping me in my class, I'd eventually become more patient, more cautious, more careful, more methodical. But I never really figured out how. It was like it was a software I had not installed or didn't know how to install it myself. Yeah, okay. There were things that helped me. Growing up in northern Sweden, you get used to quiet. It's mostly dark half the year, and I spent a lot of time in rural neighborhoods with few people to interact with. So I spent a lot of time just writing, just looking up at the sky or into the fireplace, doing absolutely nothing, and I learned to motivate myself. I think the best thing I had for myself was that I had a lot of initiative. Even though teachers were mostly swarmed or didn't have the resources to help me or to motivate me, I was able to motivate myself. And so I set my own learning goals. I figured out ways to keep myself engaged and stimulated in school. A lot of the time I was bored in school, but I set my own challenges. I came up with research projects to engage with. I started reading extracurriculars. I went to the library once a week. I would come home with 10 new books every week, and I'd swap those out next week for 10 new ones. Over and over again, I'd cycle through books like a madman. And yeah, for me, that was my primary source of entertainment before the internet came. And with the internet, of course, suddenly I had all the information in the world at my disposal, and I could read anything. And that, for me, it set me off. That was when I started to really flourish and become my own person. At 15, I felt, now I'm ready. At that point, I felt I'd absorbed so much knowledge and I'd learned so much and I thought about so much that I just had to go out and do something. I was ready to start applying myself, I wanted to get into a higher education. I wanted to do a lot of things, but yeah, my parents were always a bit worried about me, that I'd push myself too far, that I'd have a burnout, that I'd overextend myself, that I'd take on more than I can handle. But at the same time, I thought they were pretty good parents. You know why I thought they were good parents? Well, because they taught me to be independent, right? So a lot of the time, my parents, they would let me do things. They trust my judgment. They'd let me be out as long as I did because they trusted that I'd be home on time. They didn't tell me when to go to bed or what to do, or they never grounded me. They never forced me to do homework. They never told me what to do because they trusted that Eric can take care of himself. He's really good at self-management. He's really good at self-care. If he's tired, he will go and rest. If he is hungry, he'll make and cook his own food. He's able to do all these things, and he'll cook for us, and he'll also be very engaged with others. So they knew that I could take care of the home, so they'd leave me alone with my home. They'd let me, work with the stuff at an early age because they knew I wouldn't set it on fire. They trusted me, and that trust made a lot of difference for me because that carried with me as I moved out, of course, because that made the transition to an adult a lot easier. I will say, though, that, one thing I wish for my childhood, one thing I wish was different. It's not that I would have been allowed to progress to another class. I don't know where that would have taken me or what that would have meant. Maybe it would have meant that I pushed myself too far. Maybe I would have overwhelmed myself, or maybe I would have gotten more estranged from other people or disconnected, or maybe a bit too arrogant. It's possible, of course. But the one thing I'd wish is that I'd let myself be more of a kid, in a sense that I'd let myself be more outgoing and let myself be more out there and let myself be more involved in sports and other things that other kids were doing, because I needed to learn to have that physical capability to match my mental capabilities. I was a very intellectual kid, a lot in my own head, but I think if I would have gone into sports and done more physical things, I think that would have been great for me, for my endurance, for my resilience, for my health, for balancing myself out a bit more so that I could, do better. And perhaps I could have even, through that, maybe avoided having a burnout when I was in 18, 20s. Now I'm curious, what's your gifted story? How did you experience growing up as a gifted person? Did you think you were gifted, and how did that turn out later on? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you so much for watching.